Awesome, well, excited to be here. I'm Vishnu, I'm an engineer at LangChain. I thought I'd talk about how we ended up building our own internal go-to-market system. So when I joined LangChain maybe like 7 or 8 months ago, we were still growing out our sales team, and one of the biggest problems we had was we didn't have a proper system for managing our inbound. So a lead would come in, it would often just sit in our CRM, and someone would have to go in and research that lead, research that company, see if it ended up making sense to reach out to, and then go ahead and draft up an email. And by the time they did that, the lead might have gone cold, or someone else from our team might have already sent an email and reached out to that person. So we didn't have a reconciliation process, and more so, we didn't have a proper system. We didn't have a proper system in place to help manage our inbound leads coming in. So when I first joined the company, one of my first tasks was, hey, why not sit an agent on top of our inbounding system? So every time a lead comes in, let's do the heavy lifting. Let's go ahead and let the agent do the research and let the agent help draft up an email. So all our reps have to do is just decide to send out an email or not. So the first thing I did was I wanted to see what I wanted to see how our best reps were outbounding, and basically distill those same principles into our agent so we can make sure our agent has access to the best data sources on day one. Because I think one of the biggest things in building out agents and even building out the system is if it doesn't have all the same access to if it doesn't have all the same data sources that a human would have, you're not going to get 100% adoption across the sales team. So initially it was just for me looking at our top sales reps, looking exactly how they go ahead and outbound, and looking at the different data sources they use. So yes, they'll probably look inside Salesforce, but our best reps are also looking across LinkedIn to see what the company's posting about, look at any exciting product launches, and help distill all of that information in when drafting out an email. So what we ended up building for our V1 of our agent was a lead comes into Salesforce, we go ahead and kick off an agent, and at first the agent just does a few simple things. So if the lead is coming in from like contact sales or from like a trust center, that's probably a good indication that this person doesn't make sense to reach out to. So we go ahead and deflect those. Leads. Then we take it a step further. We look at the actual person. So we see if they exist within our CRM and pull any information down from there. If not, we check on LinkedIn to see like the seniority and role of that person, and maybe if the person is like a year out of college or 2 junior, it also probably doesn't make sense to reach out to. Then with all that information, we go ahead and help synthesize a set of drip emails that we can forward over to our reps. So if the lead is coming in, if the lead is already warm and we have some existing communications with the companies, we'll make sure to look at like past email correspondences, past meeting notes, and help synthesize that information in to our emails. If it's an actual cold inbound lead, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and have our agent run a search and look at, do research on the company, see what AI initiatives they have going on, maybe see any exciting product launches, and see how we can tie all of that in. And once we have all of that, we'll go ahead and draft up a set of four drip emails that'll go ahead and land in the appropriate rep Slack, and then they can go ahead and review these emails, maybe make some small edits, and go ahead and send them off. And so that was V1. That was the V1 of our agent, just a simple lead routing and email drafting agent. And I think we saw some initial success. With that and helping manage our inbound. I think the biggest thing there was it helped bring down our time to response from when a lead came in to when we actually ended up reaching out to the relevant person. So I think the system works great, but even today, we still see that LLMs aren't that great at generating like coherent text. So one of the things I wanted to also do was have the system learn over time and learn our reps' preferences, so we can take those learnings and help improve the agent, over time, and also tailor it over to our reps. And I think one of the things that I saw initially was we had a wide range in age across our GTM team, and I think like our more senior reps preferred their like subject lines all being capitalized, and our junior ones preferred them all being lowercase and a little bit and a little bit shorter. So how do we basically have the agent learn each rep style? And also continually learn that without making it too constrained. So I think this is one of the more interesting parts of the agent, which is after these set of emails land in Slack and the rep can go ahead and make an edit to them, we basically pass the original text and whatever edits the rep made and pass those over to an LLM to basically go ahead and look at the diffs, and if there's like meaningful content within those diffs, we'll go ahead and have the LLM synthesize that and store that to and basically store that to an append-only log that's keyed by the rep's user ID. So on corresponding runs, before the agent runs, it'll go ahead and pull down that rep's corresponding memory and use that when drafting when drafting the emails. And we have this as an append-only log, and then once a month we'll go ahead and compact this information down. So over time, this agent has learned the different style preferences of our reps. And funny enough, like last week we had an outage with the agent being unable to pull down its memories, and we just saw usage rate for our agent in drafting emails decline because no one wanted to use the system that didn't have its learnings. And I think the other thing was in getting this started as well. One thing our GTM team did a good job was we have like an outbounding wins Slack channel. So anytime we outbound into a new customer and we get a response back or a meeting, we basically share that wording in this shared Slack channel. So when I built the system initially, a lot of it was just pulling down, hey, what has worked in the past, distill that down, and that was the base in building out this agent. So cool. Now we had a simple agent that would go ahead and research our leads and draft up emails. I think also at this point, while we were growing our GTM team, the other thing was a lot of our reps just had way too many accounts. So like most of our reps had 80+ accounts, and some our commercial reps were dealing with on the order of 1,000 accounts. So one of the hardest things for them was making sure they're plugged into each of their different accounts, know exactly what's happening in each of their accounts, and basically just making sure that they, when they come in on Monday, they know exactly where they should be focusing on. So what we ended up building was, because we had all of our different data sources connected, what we next built was we built like an account intelligence system. So what this like variant of the agent would do is still connect to all the same data sources, but every Monday morning it would go ahead and run parallel agents across all of the different reps in an account's all the different accounts in a rep's territory, and look at, hey, in the last week, were there any recent funding rounds for that company? Were there any exciting product launches? Has there been any executive movement in and out of that company? And then we also have it hooked up with some of our analytics systems. So, hey, is this company making, or is this company viewing our docs or our pricing page, or are they looking at our open source? And basically using all of those signals to help prioritize and give each rep a digest on, here's what's happening on each of your accounts, and maybe these are like the top 3 action items you should be doing when you come in. And so I think that was good for our sales team. And then here's where we started slowly bringing this out across our go-to-market team. So for our deployed engineering folks, they wanted to know, okay, cool. Like when they across their meetings for the week, they wanted to know, hey, what does the product usage look like for this for this customer? Are they activated in the different areas? If they're not activated, do they have any like renewals coming up? Are they at risk for churning? And basically help also give our like post sales team a small digest as well on what on their meetings coming up for the week. So we had those 2 systems in place, and again, these were both just like these were both like one-way communication systems from the agent, so the agent would go ahead, run some workflow, and basically send that over to the relevant to the relevant team member on our GTM team. And I think this worked great initially, and people liked the agent, but it wasn't that widely adopted, especially outside of our GTM team. So then one day we saw one of the reps doing something interesting, which was connecting this agent connecting this agent as an MCP through to his Claude code, just to ask it basic business intelligence questions like, hey, who's the account owner for this account? What does product usage look like for this customer? And we just saw this one rep hounding this agent, just asking simple business intelligence questions. And then this made me realize, hey, what if we made this agent a two-way communication thing? So within Slack, we enabled it as a chat bot. So now all of our reps could either tag it in different channels or just message it, And that's when we really saw this agent. That's when we really saw our go-to-market agent take off internally, not just in GTM, but even outside of it across product and engineering. And I think one of the biggest things we saw was once we moved it outside into, once engineering and product started using it, the types of questions they were answering weren't necessarily filled out in our CRM or filled out in our warehouse, right? So if I'm asking questions like, which of our customers are on Azure, or what LLM provider is this customer using, how do we our agent at that point wasn't doing a great job at answering those questions, as those were like mapped one-to-one in Salesforce or in our data warehouse. So we basically wanted to build a system that would help capture these different signals over time. So the way we ended up building that was all of our meetings with customers were always transcribed by some recording system, and they were sent to BigQuery. And then what we ended up doing was every night now we have a cron that takes the raw transcript, and it looks at like 50 different signals that our GTM team and I that we thought through, right? So are they building agents for internal or external use cases? What cloud are they building on? Who are like the champions? Who are the champions and different stakeholders in place at that company? And then like on a security level, do they need to be self-hosted? Do they have any like data residency requirements? So basically all the questions that we saw our agent wasn't doing a good job of answering, we basically thought of different fields that we could extract out from calls. And so now every night for every call that our go-to-market team takes, we feed it in through this extraction pipeline, extract out these 50 signals, and store it in BigQuery. And then we have a job that'll go ahead and look at these extractions week over week and build like a state or context graph for our different customers, so we can see across time, hey, if a customer is at risk for churning, what has happened in the last few months for that customer, and basically extract these different signals out and use that in answering more qualitative questions. So I think my few takeaways are, I think the biggest thing where we lucked out was a lot of our data, we helped land it in a data warehouse, and I think that was huge because these agents are trained on SQL and Bash-like commands, so they're very good at writing SQL queries. So instead of working through different APIs, if we just expose this data in a data warehouse and have the agent make queries against it, I think that worked really well for us. And I think the other thing was also just instead of building out a massive system, just focus on one constrained problem and build a really good solution there. And I think once that's there, it's much easier to build out versus having a very big problem and starting out from scratch. And then the last thing is always make sure you have evals in place. So I think anytime we're building out a new feature request, or if there's a bug within our agent, because oftentimes you don't know how people are going to use these systems until they go live in production. It's always good to have an eval set that you should be running your agent over before you deploy it into production. And so anytime there's a regression, we'll go ahead and add it to our eval set. And then when thinking about new features, we'll think about what different happy paths will look like and encode those in in more in deterministic evals and using an LLM as a judge to help to basically help dictate that our systems are to make sure our systems are steady and our agent isn't hallucinating or messing up. Awesome. Well, thank you guys.
We have time for a few questions. So, does anybody have any questions for Vishnu? Yeah.
Hey, first of all, this is super cool. Really appreciate this talk. Learned a lot. One of the things that stood out to me was like the messaging piece and how you guys sort of improved the generative messages. It sounded like it was you guys focused more on in context loading, so like many short prompting. I imagine is sort of the shape there. I'm curious that makes a lot of sense to me. I'm curious if you guys considered other sort of like maybe more traditional post-training techniques like SFT or RL for that.
I think that's like something that like we've started to also look in more broadly as a company. It's also something we've started to look in more broadly as a company as well. But I think it's much easier to focus on that like in context piece, and I think that's like a much easier like lower hanging fruit, and basically see if you can fix the problem at like the context layer versus digging a layer lower and start training your own models. The other thing is when we want like new reps are going to keep coming in. And basically, we want our system to be like resilient enough to account for new reps coming in, and also as rep style might change over time, or as like the market changes over time. We basically want our system to basically still learn in place, and I think that's much easier to do at the context level versus going a level lower and training your own models or post training on top of them.
Perfect. We can do two more.
Great talk, and a lot of really interesting stuff. My question is, how are you doing evaluation on like shifting the base model, whatever is sitting underneath everything, when it's time to upgrade? And when you are making that shift, how are you doing it? I know you have your eval sets. Is there anything else that you're doing to make sure that you don't have regressions from the system?
Yeah, so I think the way I think about evals is like, I almost think of it as like test-driven development, where like, I think there's like the two terms that get conflated are like evals and benchmarking. And I think there's like, benchmarking is like something that like you can probably hill climb against, but like for evals, for me, I expect my agent to be passing them like 100% of the time. So for me, it's very important to have like a very constrained set of evals, and making sure that I know exactly how each test in our eval suite runs. And I think and also in designing evals, I think it's important to like look at like you can use an LLM as a judge in like rubric-based systems to basically decide if your agent if the end output is correct. But what's also more important is like the trajectory that your agent is taking. So like the other thing we do is we also look at like the different tool calls the agent takes. And I think if we have a very strong eval system, we can basically, it makes it much. I'm much more confident in upgrading our model or looking at different open source models and making sure that we can deploy those into production without regressing anything.
Awesome, thank you. Matt, do you want to head up to the stage also? Over here.
Hey, can you elaborate a little bit on the context thing that you were talking before? So the question is, when in this kind of format, I think there are specific decisions that would be very critical on customer success. For example, send email at lunchtime at Eastern time zone. I think that might be a decision that has worked well for most of the reps. And how are you logging that sort of knowledge in context? Because I'm assuming that would just get lost in compaction. So how do you deal with like these specific knowledge decisions reps have taken to close the deals?
Yeah, I think something like when to send the email is like much more of like a system level thing versus like how a rep should like structure their subject lines or like end an email is like much more at the context level. But because LangSmith, which is like LangChain's commercial offering, is an observability and monitoring software, we log all of our traces, and all this like metadata we store within LangSmith. So over time we'll basically look back on these traces, see what's working. The other thing that I didn't mention was we track like reply and open rates. So we already know like what set of traces and what decisions will basically lead to open rates. And because all of this metadata is stamped within our observability platform, periodically we'll go ahead and look over this data and look at our current agent and see if there's any like findings we can basically bring in to our system.
Awesome. Thanks.